Okay, so next we have our Desert Ecosystems panel. Joined by Mark Salvo from ONDA. So I'm up first, and then Mark, and then lunch. So everyone hang in there, okay? All right, this is a highly controversial subject, and I want to be sensitive to our people in our rural areas. Please note that I am just speaking about public lands grazing. I'm not your stereotypical enviro, I guess you'd say. I do eat beef occasionally, and I'm also a big game hunter and a bird hunter. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Okay, so the title of my talk is called Rewilding the Desert. Is it really as simple as removing the cows? 350 plants and animals live in the sagebrush sea. Every year we lose 1 million acres of the sea to invasive species, wildfire, development, climate change, and domestic livestock. I'm just going to grab my, I'll put it on the stand, it'll be a lot easier. Sorry, guys. Too high. Hello, okay. Every year we lose 1 million acres of the sea to invasive species, wildfire development, climate change, and domestic livestock grazing. The ecological cost of public lands grazing surpasses all other extractive uses in the West, endangering countless species. Domestic livestock and their infrastructure have degraded and transformed the entire sage steppe ecosystem. Cows and sheep are ecological misfits in the arid West and consequently have devastating impacts on our public lands. The baselines have shifted much in recent times. It is near impossible to imagine the deserts here in Oregon pre-European settlement. Peter Skeen Ogden does provide some insights, remarking in 1826 that the soil on the Crooked River by current-day Prineville was remarkably rich, and in some parts the grass 7 feet high. Similar conditions must have existed across Oregon's valley bottoms and riparian areas. Those days are long gone, thanks to a century of domestic livestock grazing. Public lands grazing continues today with nearly 25,000 active permits and leases on public lands. Across the West, nearly 85% of our Western public lands are grazed for a total of 250 million acres. Okay, this map shows the BLM grazing allotments in Oregon. You can see they're mostly concentrated in the southeast. And the national forests are also grazed up in northeast Oregon too. So basically the entire eastern half of the state sees public lands grazing. This slide shows the rangeland health. This is from the Bureau of Land Management's own data, and also the NEPA renewals. So there's supposed to be environmental review on permit renewals. They keep kicking the can due to a rider in Congress. But generally, where you see those red areas, that's where we're having land health failures. And most of that is attributed to livestock. And you have to keep in mind that these standards are very, very low. Sage grouse. Sage grouse are what we call a sagebrush obligate species, meaning that they are completely dependent on sagebrush ecosystems for their life cycles. They are not habitat generalists like mule deer and elk, for instance. Sage grouse are known as both an umbrella and an indicator species. When sage grouse populations are doing well, we can postulate that the sagebrush sea is healthy. Historic estimates put sage grouse populations at about 16 million birds across the West. Early explorers talk about how sage grouse used to darken the skies when they flew away. Populations are down historically by 90%. We continue to see steep declines as populations have plummeted 80% since 1965 across the range. Oregon's sage grouse population is not meeting the measly population goal of 30,000 birds. And the estimated spring sage grouse population in 2021 was 16,000 individuals, which is about 47% below the goal. Many people today Remember abundant sage grouse in Oregon's high desert. Friends of mine who grew up in Malheur County tell me how abundant the birds used to be and how easy they were to hunt. In 2010, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that the sage grouse warranted listing under the Endangered Species Act, but they have not been listed due to political interference in Congress, namely the sage grouse rider that has been attached to various appropriation bills since 2014 preventing the listing. All right, here's a graph of sage grouse populations. I believe it starts in I can see this one, 1980 down to 2021, so you can see a steady decline. All right, let's talk about domestic livestock impacts to sage grouse. So sage grouse require 7 inches of residual grass height in breeding, nesting, and brood-rearing habitats as hiding cover. This is critical, and this is well documented in the science. Chicks depend on arthropods like beetles, ants, and caterpillars for food. And of course, arthropods depend on healthy understories. And adults eat sagebrush leaves and flowers, grass and forbs. Forbs make up about 40% of their diet. Livestock decimate the grass and forb sage understory, exposing sage grouse to predators. No food, no cover, that's no life at all. So here's the sagebrush. You can see that the understory here is gone. And this is quite common across our BLM lands in Oregon. And also fences. Let's see, what slide am I on? I'm on 10. So fences are ubiquitous across the West. They're used to contain, exclose, or enclose livestock. And there's a collision problem with sage grouse, also with ungulates too. But here we're talking about sage grouse right now. There's a study out of Wyoming that showed over a 7-month period, there were 146 instances of finding sage grouse feathers and or carcasses near about a 5-mile stretch of fence. So if you can just imagine, there's roughly 62,000 miles of fence across the West. So there's a lot of opportunity for collisions. Well, there we go. Got it right on there. All right, let's talk about cheatgrass. How am I doing on time? Good, okay. Cheatgrass was first introduced in the mid-1800s in the United States. It soon began spreading across the West by the late 1800s. It was actually spread and propagated by ranchers to help stabilize soils from severe overgrazing. Cheatgrass is highly flammable and thrives after fire. Historical fire intervals in sagebrush are understood to be anywhere between 500 and 400 years historically. Now with cheatgrass and other invasive annuals, fire spreads, the intervals are much less. So we're looking at every 5 to 15 years. Sagebrush does not recover quickly, if at all. Usually it does not recover at all. Livestock help spread cheatgrass by disturbing the soils with their hooves. Cheatgrass thrives on soil disturbance, also thrives after fire. Seeds are carried in their fur and feces. Livestock eat and kill native bunch grasses that would otherwise prevent their spread. And cheatgrass is only palatable to livestock for about 2 weeks in the spring. The only way that we know to help prevent further spread of cheatgrass is, unfortunately, to remove livestock and let the land recover naturally. Native plants on most sites will recover and outcompete cheatgrass, but it takes many, many decades to do so, far longer than the time horizons our land managers are willing to accept, and because, well, they feel the need to manage and manipulate everything. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, I had to throw this in. This is the pygmy rabbit. It's another sagebrush obligate species. They're cute as hell. You can hold them in the palm of your hand. Livestock trample their burrows. And actually, WWP just submitted a listing petition under the ESA for the pygmy rabbit. So I wanted to throw that in there for you. All right, let's look at some, thank you. Let's look at some healthy sage steppe photos, okay? We've got lupin, I always get this backwards, balsam root, arrowleaf. Arrowleaf, balsam root, thank you. Okay, these have not been munched by cows. They're beautiful. And this is some blue bunch wheatgrass. This is on the Owyhee Canyonlands. I don't know that it's old growth, but it's old. Here's a very healthy sagebrush understory. You can see all the forbs and the grasses there. It's another shot. And okay, well, we're on 17 now. This is in the Burns district, and I just want to talk about how cows tend to congregate in riparian areas. That's where the grass grows. That's where they get their water. That's where they escape the summer heat. Riparian areas make up less than 2% of the western arid landscapes, and livestock they congregate there. And this is the result. These were taken this spring, actually. This was as well, too. This is way too early for cows. This is in the critical growth period, and there's not going to be much out there this year for forage. Okay, here's some photos from Vail District in Oregon. You can see riparian areas, just trashed by cows. This head cutting going on. This is also in Vail. This was part of the Vail project where they ripped out sagebrush, I think it was in the 60s and 70s, and planted crested wheatgrass, which is a non-native grass and is not used ecologically by native species. Another shot, we've got some cheatgrass here, no natives, and then there's that busted understory again. And I just want to just go back and forth, you can see. And this is very, very common. This is exceedingly rare. Sometimes you spend all day or a couple days trying to find even just a small example of this here. This is a Lahontan cutthroat trout stream. This is called McDermott Creek. And this is where livestock have access to the creek. And this is where they don't. You can see the off-color water. There's livestock grazing above this. Okay, here's a helicopter spraying herbicides. So I was hunting in southern Oregon, and I captured this on my phone. And we could have gotten poisoned by this. This is USDA APHIS, Invasive Plant and Pest Program. Thousands of acres of BLM lands, including wilderness study areas, are sprayed each year to help control invasive weeds like cheatgrass, native grasshoppers, Mormon crickets, poisoning the land and insects, mammals, and humans included, all in support of public lands grazing operations. Again, the best way to control cheatgrass, the only way we know of, would be to remove the cows and let passive recovery do its work. Okay, I want to talk about one more example, and then I'll finish it up here. This is what many consider to be the perfect rewilding example. This happened on Hart Mountain National Wildlife Refuge. So 1994, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I think it was their refuge management plan that this was decided. They found in their analysis that no amount of livestock grazing was compatible with healthy antelope populations, and this is what the refuge was established to do, was to protect the antelope there. So pre-1994, we had cut banks up to 15 feet deep, cows on all lands except within a small enclosed area, and only 13% of the streams were characterized as being in good condition. 73% of riparian areas characterized as either poor or in very poor condition. Some homework, everybody, you got to watch this film. If we do this next year, we will show this film. This is called Rewilding a Mountain. It tells the story. You can find this on Vimeo, vimeo.com. It's available for free. And I just took some screenshots. So this is 1988, 2013. So before and after. Before, after. Before, after. Willow's coming in. All right, aspen. Cows love to chew aspen. All right, so these older trees, this was pre-livestock grazing. And then you see those younger trees. Well, that was after 1994. Do you see what's missing in the middle? An entire generation of aspen. That was during livestock grazing. So we have an entire missing generation here. Here's the antelope populations on the refuge. You can see there's kind of a blip just before 1990. That's when cows were removed. And it went down. And then they started removing the fences. So now the antelope have free range, and the populations are just exploding out there. One cow and her calf equals the amount of forage consumed in a month, equals 2 elk, 6 mule deer, 10 antelope. Also livestock socially displaced, native ungulates. So if you're a hunter, cows are competing with the forage that ungulates consume. They're also displacing them. And of course the fences, right? They block migration. And It's a big problem. So I asked the question, is rewilding the desert really as simple as removing the cows? I will leave that up to all of you to consider. The Voluntary Grazing Permit Retirement Act of 2022, I don't know if this was reintroduced. Andy, Mark, does anyone know? 2023? Yeah? Okay. Adam Smith and Jared Huffman. Provides federal grazing permit holders the option to waive their permit in exchange for fair market value compensation. The Federal Lands Management Agency would then be directed to retire the associated grazing permit from further grazing activity. So we see this as a fair and equitable transition for ranchers when they are ready to relinquish their grazing permits. And again, we do this with compassion, but we just have to look out there to see this is not working. This is not working out there for all of us. These are public lands. What can we do to rewild? Well, I thought I'd throw this in there. Support the Voluntary Grazing Permit Retirement Act. Get engaged with Land Management Agency NEPA projects. Get organized and advocate for change on the local, state, and national level. Join grassroots organizations that support this work. Dream big and advocate for the seemingly impossible. And that's all I have. Thank you.